Hello, and welcome to Tech Frontier News, your trusted source for the latest updates from around the world. I'm Joe Pickett, and I'm glad you could join us today. We begin with a major developing story in the Middle East, where rising tensions are sparking global concern. Iran has issued a definitive warning: if President Trump follows through on his threat to destroy Iran's energy infrastructure, Tehran will completely and permanently close the Strait of Hormuz to all global shipping traffic. Trump's ultimatum gave Iran until tomorrow night to fully reopen the waterway without conditions or face the obliteration of its power plants and energy facilities. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most strategically vital shipping corridors on the planet, carrying approximately one-fifth of the entire world's oil and natural gas supplies every single day. Since Iran began restricting and threatening shipping through the strait, global fuel prices have surged dramatically, sending shockwaves through economies across every continent. The British government has publicly challenged Israel's assertion that Iranian ballistic missiles are now capable of striking European capitals including London, dismissing the claim as unsupported by credible intelligence assessments. In a significant development confirmed within the last hour, the British Prime Minister and President Trump have spoken directly by telephone, with the two leaders discussing the urgent need to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian ballistic missiles have sat at the very center of this conflict from its opening hours. Alongside drone warfare, Iran's missile program has become the most powerful symbol of Iranian military resistance. State media continues broadcasting actively, sending a deliberate message to adversaries. Iran's missiles do not always need to strike their intended targets to achieve strategic impact. The psychological and political effect of launching them carries weight regardless. The revelation that Iran fired two ballistic missiles targeting Diego Garcia, the joint US-UK military base located 2,500 miles south of Iran in the remote Indian Ocean. Iran possesses the largest and most diverse missile arsenal of any nation in the Middle East region. The overwhelming majority of Iran's missile systems are short to medium-range weapons, designed to strike targets within the broader regional geography. Following the Diego Garcia strike attempt, Israel dramatically revised its assessment, claiming Iranian missiles may be capable of traveling twice that distance, theoretically placing parts of continental Europe within reach. The British government has firmly rejected this claim. Senior officials stated they are not aware of any credible intelligence assessment suggesting Iran is even attempting to target European cities. At extreme ranges, Iranian missiles would become wildly inaccurate. Iran does not possess large numbers of these systems. Any incoming missile would need to penetrate sophisticated European air defense networks. Iran would be launching a small number of inaccurate missiles with reduced warhead payloads against air defense architectures specifically optimized to intercept exactly this type of threat. Under these conditions, the incentive for Iran to attempt strikes on European capitals is extremely limited, unless Tehran calculated that political impact outweighed any realistic military benefit. While the debate over European missile threats continues, the far more immediate and concrete crisis remains the effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz, already disrupting global energy markets. President Trump escalated matters dramatically last night by posting on social media, warning Iran to fully and unconditionally reopen the strait within 48 hours or face obliteration of power plants. Iran's president responded by insisting the strait remained open to legitimate traffic. The Speaker of the Iranian parliament issued a far more aggressive counter-statement, threatening irreversible destruction of energy infrastructure and oil facilities across the region. Analysts have outlined the two stark choices now facing President Trump as his self-imposed deadline approaches. Achieving regime change would require an extraordinarily large ground invasion force marching directly on Tehran. Most serious analysts consider this option militarily inconceivable. The second option is for Trump to declare victory, claiming military objectives of degrading Iran's capabilities have been achieved, and begin withdrawing from the conflict. Given the ongoing Iranian resistance and unresolved Hormuz crisis, a declared victory would be widely seen as hollow. Trump would face significant political humiliation. Despite all the rhetoric about ending this war, every passing day brings fresh escalation rather than de-escalation. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made a personal vow to pursue and eliminate senior commanders of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The towns of Deona and Arad bore the direct impact of the Iranian missile strikes. In Deona, a missile impacted within miles of Israel's nuclear facility. In Arad, another landed within meters of residential apartments. These strikes represent a rare and significant breach of Israel's highly sophisticated multi-layered air defense system, a system that had been performing at exceptional levels throughout the conflict. The total confirmed injury count from these strikes stands at over 160 people, a number that underscores the human cost of a conflict now entering its fourth week. 3 weeks into this war, public confidence in Israel's missile defense capabilities has remained broadly high. Some residents, after enduring repeated alarms throughout the day, made the decision not to relocate to shelters, reflecting both fatigue and the historically high success rate of Israeli air defenses. Israeli military leadership has asserted that the vast majority of Iran's missile-launching infrastructure has been eliminated or significantly degraded throughout the campaign. These latest strikes serve as a stark and undeniable reminder: Iran's regime retains both operational control and residual capability to continue prosecuting this war despite 3 weeks of continuous intensive bombardment. Israeli military officials argue that while Iran's capacity is diminishing, the threat has not been eliminated. Iran is still willing to target assets of nations not directly involved in the fighting. The firing of missiles toward Diego Garcia, a British military asset, while the United Kingdom was not a direct combatant, has particularly alarmed officials in London. Israeli officials have used this incident to argue that the Iranian threat is not limited to the immediate conflict zone, and the question of whether Iran could eventually strike further afield should not be casually dismissed. Netanyahu reiterated his position that Iran's regime represents a threat to the entire international community, not merely to Israel or the United States. Netanyahu expressed measured optimism that some international leaders are beginning to move in that direction, while insisting pace and scale of international engagement remains well below what the situation demands. On the northern front, the Israeli military has confirmed that it expects weeks of further fighting ahead against both Iranian forces and Hezbollah. Israel carried out a strike today on a bridge spanning the Litani River in southern Lebanon. The stated objective was to sever supply and movement routes used by Hezbollah fighters. 1 million Lebanese civilians have now been forcibly displaced from their homes as a direct result of Israeli military operations in the country. Israeli forces have been ordered to demolish structures in certain areas of southern Lebanon. Military commanders described this as modeled on operational methods used previously in Gaza. The Prime Minister is convening an emergency meeting tomorrow, bringing together the Governor of the Bank of England, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and the Energy Secretary. The exclusive focus of this meeting will be assessing and addressing the rising cost of living pressures being directly generated by the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. The chief executive of Centrica, the company that owns British Gas, has stated publicly that an increase in household energy bills may be entirely unavoidable if the Middle East conflict continues. The impact on British consumers is already visible and measurable at the fuel pump. Petrol prices have risen by 12 pence per litre. The increase in diesel has been double, 24 pence per litre. The more consequential question is whether these pressures will translate into a surge in domestic energy bills when the current price cap arrangement expires during the summer months. The Centrica chief executive acknowledged prices have moved by as much as 25% in a single trading day during this crisis. Government ministers are facing mounting pressure to act decisively. A minister confirmed the government is monitoring the situation on an hour-by-hour basis. The minister referenced an upcoming reduction in the energy price cap scheduled to take effect in April, which will reduce average household bills by approximately £120. The critical concern is what happens after June, when the price cap is next reviewed. If the conflict is still active, economic pressures could result in a sharp reversal of any bill reductions achieved in spring. Reform UK and the Conservative Party are both advocating for maximising oil and gas extraction from the North Sea alongside removing green energy levies from household bills. The Liberal Democrats are arguing the most effective protection against future energy shocks is growing the overall economy and negotiating a customs union agreement with the European Union. The extent of financial pain absorbed by British households depends almost entirely on how long this conflict lasts and how severe it becomes. Much of that is entirely outside the British government's direct control. Economic analysts have emphasised that the COBRA emergency meeting tomorrow is an unusual and significant step, but cautioned against expecting immediate specific policy announcements. The meeting represents a serious attempt to map the economic landscape and stress test contingency plans rather than announce pre-prepared financial interventions. A wave of inflation is building from the disruption in the Persian Gulf where shipping has been blocked or threatened. This wave is already beginning to filter through into domestic price levels across Britain. The critical question is how long the conflict lasts. If it extends for 3 months or longer, the economic consequences become dramatically more severe and complex. Analysts highlighted several often overlooked supply chain vulnerabilities: helium supplies for semiconductor manufacturing, urea for agricultural fertilizers, and other critical industrial materials transiting conflict-affected routes. The longer this conflict continues, the more these secondary and tertiary economic effects accumulate, potentially creating inflationary pressures extending far beyond energy into food prices and manufactured goods. The political relationship between British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and President Trump has been a source of considerable tension throughout this conflict and shows no meaningful signs of improvement. Trump has previously described Starmer publicly as, in his words, no Winston Churchill. The sketch, from the debut broadcast of Saturday Night Live UK, depicted Starmer as weak and so conflict-averse he was unable to even bring himself to answer a telephone call from Donald Trump. The reposting of this content by a sitting American president about a sitting Allied head of government, particularly one who just agreed to allow American forces to use British military bases, struck many observers as deeply inappropriate. Downing Street declined to issue any formal comment on Trump's decision to repost the mocking content. The call lasted approximately 20 minutes. According to Downing Street's official readout, the conversation was described as constructive. The central topic was the current military situation in the Middle East and specifically the urgent need to reopen the Strait of Hormuz to restore normal global shipping operations. Allies of the Prime Minister have pushed back firmly against any suggestion that Starmer has been intimidated or pressured by Trump, pointing to his refusal of Trump's request to use British bases for offensive operations. The public dimension of this relationship, with an American president openly mocking a key ally through social media, raises profound questions about the true nature and tone of what is being discussed in private between these two leaders.